So, all right. So welcome everyone, and for those of you that are watching this later on through via recording, welcome to the webinar. Today we're going to be talking about outsourcing the sales function or sales as a service. And this topic is near and dear to my heart because I've actually used contract sales assistants in the past as a VP of sales and as a CEO, and I've actually been contract sales assistants for companies. And I really do think it's a powerful tool for organizations to use, but there's some pros and cons and some things to consider. You know, we'll get into that today during the webinar. In terms of the agenda, what we're going to be talking about today is we'll just get into a quick introduction. I'll introduce myself and we'll mention Zora and Clarence, but Zora and Clarence, I will ask you to introduce yourself a little bit more with a little bit more detail as we move through the presentation. So maybe just wave when I pop your names up. We'll talk a little bit about fractional assistance and why organizations do that. It's not just sales. It actually typically it's more on the accounting front, finance front, HR front, code as a service, that type of thing. We'll speak a little bit to why sales is perceived as being kind of a tricky thing to contract out. I'll speak to my experiences anecdotally across, I think it's 3 different examples that I'll give you of companies that where I've leveraged sales as a service. We will then do a quick introduction to Stable.work. Clarence is the CRO there, and then we'll introduce you to OmniGlobe Business Solutions. Zora is the CEO there, and then I have a number of questions that I'm going to be asking Clarence and Zora, and just from an agenda perspective, outside of this agenda, there really is no. So this is not necessarily an opportunity for us to sell you our wares, if you will. We just want to be informational. If there's some information that you get from this particular presentation that you want to follow up on, by all means, we're on LinkedIn. Please connect with us. We'll get emails out to you via email afterwards. But you have my pledge that you will not be solicited after this, overtly after this particular presentation. But if you connect, or if one of us connects with you on LinkedIn, I hope that's okay. All right, so just a quick introduction to myself. For those of you that don't know me, there's some folks on the call here that I have some great history with. I'll do a quick shout out to Sean Cruz. You don't have to say hi to Sean, but it's good to see you on this particular webinar. My background is 25 years in high tech, primarily as a VP of sales. I've been a part of 4 different startup organizations where I was either the chief revenue officer, the VP of sales, or the VP of sales and marketing. And I've been a part of 6 outcomes or 6 exits with positive outcomes throughout my career. Not always the architect, sometimes a passenger in the boat, but I've seen a lot of change in my career, and I worked for a lot of different companies because of that change. And so I try and bring a little bit of that to bear when I'm working with companies from a consulting perspective. Also seen my fair share of challenges and train wrecks. So I've gone through 1 receivership and 1 asset sale, and there's a few other battle scars as well. So that's my background. Notables, I was part of an organization called Fastlane Technologies in the late 90s. Early 2000s. We took that company to about $16 million, and we were able to sell it to Quest Software for 4x. Actually, it was closer to 5x, but $100 million acquisition. So that was a really cool experience. And I was part of the leadership team there, not at the C level or the exec level, but I was a director of sales at the time. I was also a VP of sales at a company called Titus. I was there from 2008 to 2013, took the organization from about 2 million in revenue to just under 20 million. I think we had 3 employees in sales at the time, and when I was done, I think there was a total of 25. And in that 5-year period, we won the Deloitte Fast 50 Award for revenue growth. So that's something that really thought was a fantastic experience. Have also been part of a really good multiple exit with CloudLink, where we were acquired. We had $1 million in ARR, so not a ton. And we were sold for 14 million to EMC. So that was a really cool experience. And then I've also been a CEO. I was a CEO of a company called 4Point, where it was a restructuring or a turnaround. So when I inherited the company from the founder who had retired, I was the VP of sales at the time. We were losing money. I think we were to the tune of minus $200,000 a year, and was able to turn it around from a balance sheet perspective in about 18 months to $300,000 or $400,000 in the black. So those are just some career highlights. What I do now is I teach a system for running companies. It's called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And really, it's basically all I do. But I have in the past acted as a fractional sales and go-to-market person. And there will be elements of EOS that I will bring up in this presentation. Just small little tidbits, but if you're interested in it, just go to my website at bytownventures.com or go to eosworldwide.com, and you'll learn a little bit more about basically a system for running an organization, not unlike a sales methodology for running your sales organization. So my guests today are Clarence De Silva, and he is the Chief Revenue Officer for Stable.work. He is out of Vancouver, BC, and Zora Arnautovic. Zora is out of Dubrovnik, Croatia. And Zora and I actually go way back. I'll speak to that in the webinar today. I have some great anecdotal experience with Zora, as she was actually a contracted sales director for me at Titus, and we've got lots and lots of stories and some great memories of working together, and we'll get into that as we move through the presentation. So just a couple of foundational things. Why go fractional? I mean, we've all heard of the gig economy. The gig economy is here. It's been here for quite a while. And it's probably even more relevant now with the pandemic, what we've gone through over the last 18 months. From my perspective, there's 3 reasons why you'd want to go fractional. There's probably many more, but from an anecdotal, experience perspective, it's often cash flow that would lead you down this path. So you may not have the money today as an organization to go out and hire a 6-figure or a mid 6-figure sales leader or senior sales executive, but you might have $20,000 to $30,000 in the kitty that you can spend within a fairly concentrated period of time. So it might be a cash flow thing. We all know that when you hire someone, it's not just the salary that you pay them; it's all the benefits and all the associated costs with having an employee. So cash flow is a reason. There's contractual burden. So one of my favorite stories, well, it wasn't a good one at the time, is I went out and I hired a director of sales for Europe, Middle East, and Africa back in the Titus days, and this particular resource was out of the UK, and this particular resource did not work out, but this particular resource had a past probation. And so when we went to make a change with this particular resource, there were all sorts of laws and regulations in place that we had to adhere to, and a decent size check that we had to write in order to say goodbye to this person. So there's a contractual burden with hiring people within your organization when you're not really sure if you need to go down that path. So that's another reason. And then for me, also it's the expertise that you want operates that way. So there's fractional sales assistants, but there's also fractional corporate development assistants, BD assistants, and you might have someone within perhaps Silicon Valley that can open a bunch of doors for you, but they're not prepared to go join your organization. They're prepared to, on a retainer basis, perhaps open those doors for you, but not to join your organization. So those are 3 reasons that I've seen in the past for going fractional. Logical avenues for a lot of organizations. Many organizations have used fractional CFOs. So they'll have a chief financial officer come in a day a week to make sure the books are in good shape and that you're doing proper FP&A. Chief marketing officer is something that folks look at often. Marketing agencies, is something that's readily outsourced. We have companies out there that will do code development. So all you got to do is architect the solution and provide some direction to the organization, but you don't necessarily have to go out and hire 5 to 7 developers. You can go and employ this organization to do code for you. And then virtual HR is something that I've seen on a regular basis as well. And someone coming in for a day or two a week, or maybe even a day a month to help you out on the HR side. But we're talking today about sales. And there's 3 challenges that I know a lot of organizations that I work with struggle with when we talk about contracting out sales. One is accountability, and that's a big one, right? So it's one thing to go out and hire, an organization or salespeople to sell for you, but the accountability for the sales, right? So do you outsource that? And by the way, I would suggest you probably shouldn't. So if you outsource, components of your sales function, the accountability for the revenue number will still need to reside with either your CEO, your CLO, or maybe your CRO, VP of sales. So they struggle with that. They struggle with identity. So, when you've got organizations that are reaching out on your behalf to, prospects, how do they represent themselves on LinkedIn? How do they represent themselves? Do they carry business cards? Not really sure. They may be representing other companies. So they struggle with that concept. And then they also struggle with integrity. So these freelance sales folks may not have the same core values that this particular organization is very proud of. And I personally have had one experience myself where I was paying a sales resource on contract, and when they were picking up the phone, they were picking up the phone with another company's name, on the front end of that. So, like, how do you deal with some of these types of things? So when we meet Zora and Clarence, we'll be asking some of those questions. They'll maybe be volunteering how they deal with some of those challenges. So those are some of the reasons why folks struggle a little bit with sales outsourcing or sales as a service. But I do want to provide you with some anecdotal examples of how I've used it in the past, right? So when I was with Titus, as a VP of sales, we had a big year one year where I think our sales target was $5 million in revenue, and we delivered 10. So we had a really, really good year. There were a couple of really big deals, large government and military deals that contributed to that $10 million. But when we overexceeded on that particular number, the CEO took me aside and he said, "Scott, I'm going to take $1 million. I'm going to carve it out from what you've delivered. And that I'm prepared to lose that million. I know it's a bit scary to think about it this way. I'm prepared to lose that million. But what I want to do is I want to get into new markets. And so we're going to spend this $1 million on marketing activities in new markets and contracted sales agents in new markets." And when we did that, I hired a number of contracted sales agents for Titus, probably about 6, and we spent time out in the field educating them on the value proposition. And actually, Zora was one of the people that I hired, and she ran our Central European and Middle Eastern sales practice. And I can tell you that even though it took a little bit longer than we hoped, and that's always the case, unfortunately, Zora and some of the work she did for us, some of the doors she opened, and some of the markets that she brought to the table ended up saving the day for us later on when we had a dip in our sales based on some government challenges in North America. So that's one example. When I was at CloudLink, we ended up getting acquired by EMC. And of course, many startups get started up to be acquired. And we had someone on contract in the Valley, John Heltzel. He actually doesn't know I'm mentioning his name, but I don't think he'll mind it, where he basically got us meetings with Google, EMC, Dell, all the big high-tech firms. And we actually had an encryption solution for network attached storage. And we were able to brief all of these companies, and ultimately it's one of these briefings that got us acquired. And then when I was at 4Point, I came to the conclusion that I needed some marketing assistance, and I only had about $30,000–$40,000 to spend, and I had a choice. I could either go out and hire for $40,000, let's say a fresh out of college marketing coordinator, or I could spend $20,000 in one quarter on a couple of campaigns with an agency, and then $20,000 in another quarter on a couple of campaigns with an agency. And this particular agency was called Positive Venture Group. That's their logo there. And that was a much better use of time, effort, and resources. And I was able to quantify my return because they were measured very simply, like how many leads were they bringing to the table, as opposed to a marketing resource that I would have had to bring in. And I would have had to train this person. I would have had to mentor this person. And it would have been me as the CEO doing that because no one else was going to. And I just didn't have the cycles for that. So those are three examples. And then I've also been a fractional VP of sales at Pythian prior to them getting acquired by private equity. So I started out coming in there 3 days a week. I managed a 25-person sales force for them. And then it ended up becoming a 5-day-a-week job for about 3 months. But then I moved on, and it was just the perfect stopgap for Pythian at the time. And I've also been a fractional corporate development executive and was able to help get Live QoS sold to Nokia. And so those are my experiences, my success stories, if you will. Now, there's plenty of lessons learned, and we'll get into that. But what I want to do now is I want to introduce you to our guests, Clarence and Zora. So the very first person that I'm going to introduce you to is Clarence. And Clarence, I've got a couple of questions for you that I will ask when we get into our fireside chat. But
Sure.
Can you just introduce us to Stable.work? Who are you? What do you do, and how does that work?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Scott. So my name's Clarence. I'm the CSO at Stable.work. Background on our company, we launched the first iteration of our platform in 2016. We went through a rebrand in 2019, been growing ever since. We've got about 200, just under 200 businesses that they're actively selling on our platform. And essentially what we do is, we work with companies that have a product or service. They're selling it B2B. They've got a target group of business that they'd like to go after, and how they leverage our platform primarily is top of funnel. It's the front end of the sales process. So we work big, beautiful lists of prospects that fit their ideal customer profile. We maintain a high volume of highly personalized outreach. We qualify, we hand them off in the form of a meeting with that sales qualified lead for their team to close. What makes us different, because I'm sure all of you have run across, sales as a service agencies or call centers, or what makes us different from all of that is how we approach this problem. We're not an agency. When you're working with Stable, it's not like you're outsourcing your sales offshore to India, Indonesia, the Philippines, anything like that. We are a marketplace, right? So it's like independent local sales professionals that actually do the work. But our clients maintain complete control on who's representing their brand. What we're trying to do is give our clients the control that you get from having that in-house sales team, with all the flexibility that Scott was touching on around freelance, right? You get to ramp up, you get to scale back, you get to access the talent that you need when you need it, which again is a fundamental difference. Now, to kind of alleviate some of these challenges with like the typical freelance engagement, that's where our technology stack comes in. So the platform, you think, there's a lot of freelance platforms out there, right? Like you've got Fiverr that focuses on marketing. You've got Upwork that focuses on, custom software development and marketing. What makes us different is our platform and marketplace has been built for the sales function, right? Sales isn't a project. Right? It's super easy if you're hiring a graphic designer to take a look at their portfolio and say, hey, this person can do the job. Sales is a fundamentally different beast, right? Person with the fanciest LinkedIn profile might just have a fancy LinkedIn profile, right? The person that nails the interview might just be really good at nailing interviews, right? And in sales, the proof is in the pudding. So our platform has been built to manage that process end to end, right? So all of our clients get absolute full transparency on every motion, every action, and every activity that leads to the outcomes that we're trying to deliver.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And we'll get into a little bit of detail when we chat around the fire. But one thing that really appealed to me about your service, because I got introduced to your service by an angel investing firm about 3 or 4 months ago, was the idea of senior sales executives that are, they could be, I mean, who knows? Maybe they've done really well in their career and they're semi-retired, but they still have the sales bug.
You you
Um,
got
you,
you got it. Right.
and
Like
yeah,
just add to that, Scott. Like that's the point. Like you'll never find a job for like a stable freelancer on a job board like Indeed or whatever,
yeah,
Monster. We've got a very specific persona of sales professionals that we go after that are the supply side of our marketplace. And it's exactly that, right? It's people that typically are either unavailable, they're too costly, or they're too qualified. So they'll just never show up as a candidate for that full-time SDR position, but they're attracted to the work because of the fractional flexibility, right? So I'll give you a couple examples. We've got, this lady, Jennifer, she was an ex-VP of sales at a Fortune 5 for 5 years. She had a kid. Kids started going to preschool. And as you said, Scott, she's got that sales bug. She's doing 18 hours a week for a client, right? She's been doing it for the last six months. Another story, we've got this gentleman that, his background, and I kind of really remember this because my family went through something similar. His dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, right? And he was the top performer at a big group health organization. He was actually their SDR manager. He graduated to an SDR manager position. And what he needed was flexibility in his schedule because, full-time live-in care is challenging and expensive. The company couldn't give it to him. He came across Stable, tried it out for a couple of weeks, ended up quitting his job, and he's still on the platform working over 40 hours a week between two companies, but he gets more control in his schedule and flexibility. So quality of talent for sure is another advantage of the fractional use case.
good stuff. That's awesome. Yeah, and maybe we'll dig a little deeper into that. So over to Zora. So just before I introduce Zora, again, I've got some experience with Zora. I have a lot of time for Zora. She really, really helped us out at Titus. And there's no one out there that I know that's better at opening doors and getting appointments and getting meetings. And really, if you think about it, that's as long as you've got a structured, pitch, and you've got a structured proof of concept process. If you're on the technical software side, it's all about getting in front of the right audience at the right level, right? And I'll let Zora introduce herself in OmniGlobe. But we used her at Titus basically for developing our Europe, Middle East, and Africa, market. And over to Zora, introduce OmniGlobe.
Thank you so much, Scott. What can I say? Thanks for the nice word. And it was a great pleasure working with you over, I would say, 5 years. I can give you a very quick background of myself and OmniGlobe, what are we doing. Basically, I'm Canadian. I'm also North American, but I'm also European. I lived in Canada 25 years, but last 10 years, I've been living here in Europe, in Germany, Croatia, and traveling. They ask me very often, where is my home? I said it's in a hotel, but in the last 2 years was a hotel. Anyway, I've been working in the IT industry, responsible mostly for engagement of end users, enterprise deals, and managing channel operations. So penetrating pretty much, like Scott said, EMEA region. Since 2004, OmniGlobe, as a sales consultants, right now we are 10 people. We act as an extension of the vendor sales team. And we help vendors in EMEA region to sell or approach or engage directly C-level enterprises. Quite good names that we completed and accomplished to close. And at the end of the day, depends on the strategy, we close through the channel partners or through directly. And then we really help address the security challenges and cybersecurity, in application security, enterprise mobile security, identity access management, email security, risk compliances, as you probably are aware, some of the regulations in Europe, GDPR, etc. So alongside our very extensive network, as Scott knows, working with him closely, is over 30 active, either distributor, resellers, VARs, or system integrators. And we currently are selling and directly engaging over 250 active enterprise customers in the EMEA region and on behalf of their clients. By the end of the day, as I mentioned, customer or vendors wants to sell through the channel partner. So we have the way to do that, basically. And the end user side, we've been I would say, experts to manage trusted relationship and act as a trusted advisor among CISOs, CIOs, CTOs, and as I mentioned, system integrators, DPOs, risk compliance guys, etc. Working with Titus is a similar scenario as working with other vendors, those who are ready for enterprise deals and those who are ready for expansion in the EMEA region. So our success and our expertise is working really from ground up, from initial steps, from bringing potential customers and resellers and raise the awareness around the vendor and working closely with the team to maximize sales and growth in the territory. And as I reported to Scott, and as I was able to do that for Titus, I'm doing for other vendors. So basically, that's very shortly. We established very strong relationship with a major like Siemens, UniCredit Bank, Bayer, Sanofi, Safran, lots of Ministry of Defense. All of these customers was Titus customers, and we established this relationship with big players, system integrators like CGI, T-System, Entity Security, Atos, Computer Center, and etc. Some of the example will be we closed German Army for Titus in conjunction with CGI. So our model and our sales approach as a sales consultant and my 10 sales guys are working.
Oh, hang on, Zora. I'm going to get into that. I'm going to get into that. I'm going to cut you off, but we'll get into that. But you know, you bring up. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to sort of keep this structured. You bring up something that's super important for Europe specifically, right? It's the partner angle. Partners are very, very important in North America for enterprise sales for sure. But in Europe, really, it is very rare that you would go and close a deal directly. It is through partnerships and having that network of partners, as well as, you know, you do need to cover off on the CISO and the CEO and the CTO and all these types of people. Like that is so important. Okay, good. That's and how many employees are you up to now, Zora?
10.
10. Okay, so those are just quick introductions to Zora and to Clarence.
Thank you.
Now, what we're going to do now is I've got some prepared questions for Clarence and Zora, and I'm just going to put on my reading glasses because I'm getting old, and go through some things. What I would like to do, if we don't cover off on some of the objections, if you could speak to them as well, like the identity conundrum and whatnot, the integrity conundrum, that would be great. But we'll see how we do. So you know, let's start with Clarence. I got a bit of a demo. It is web-based. It looks like you can schedule in literally hourly, you know, some pitches. But I don't want to, you know, ruin this here. So can you just describe to the group that we have here how your service does work? Walk me through the steps on how you engage, and then specifically what outcomes do you work towards?
Right. Okay. So when we work with a client, essentially, if we're going to be working together, the first step is the clients go through a very structured and meticulous onboarding process. It starts with an online questionnaire. Average time on form is about 30 minutes for context of their investment into that process. And then our growth team gets to work. And there's essentially 3 things that we'll accomplish in the onboarding. First thing is we'll obviously define their ideal customer persona or profile for their campaign with us. We do that up front because we've obviously got to have a crystal clear picture of the business that they want. But 2, if they don't have a prospect list, our data team will work with them to build out that big, beautiful list of prospects to approach.
On that note, sorry, Clarence, if I may,
right.
That's a great point. So if the company you're engaging with does not have that list,
right,
because I will recommend that they should have that list before they engage anyone, hire anyone or engage, or at the very least have an idea of what their customer personas, prospect personas look like. But if they don't have that list, do you? I don't want to get into too much pricing, but you told me it's relatively cost effective for you to create the list for them.
Yeah, it's cost effective for us to do it. So if anyone's familiar with B2B databases, they're expensive, right? So there's a lot of players in the space. You know, I can just list them, right? ZoomInfo is probably the market leader. They spend about 30 million bucks a year on data cleansing. You've got Data Monitor, Sales Genie, Seamless.ai, the list goes on. Cognism, if you're building lists in the UK. The benefit of the databases, the good ones anyways, is they've got the validated emails, the direct extensions, the mobiles. The downside of the databases is twofold. One is they're expensive, right? Minimum cost to play with some of these databases are 15 to 20K USD annual subscription, no a la carte data orders, right?
And sorry to interrupt again. When I was VP of sales at CloudLink, we engaged a company called, I don't know if they're still around, Rain King.
They might have been acquired potentially. Yeah. I know. ZoomInfo has done a bunch of massive acquisitions.
I think
space.
ZoomInfo bought them, but
yeah.
we went and engaged them, and it was 20K US.
Right. And the second challenge with the database is it's never a one size fits all with databases. So the reason that they'll force you in these annual subscriptions is, they know rule number 2, it's never a one size fits all, right? So, one database might be really good in medical, but, not do anything for your other persona, right? In which case you've now got to tap into another. What we've done is we partnered with 10 of the leading B2B databases out there. So we've got a la carte access just because of the sheer volume of data that we purchase. So our clients always start with the best lists. Second thing we do is we'll capture the information we need to build out that initial talk track, which is, some companies will call it a script. Some companies will call it a playbook, but this is essentially the framework of how conversations are navigated when we're having them with their ideal customers. And includes everything, right? FAQs around the common questions that'll come up on an introductory call. Like, we don't have to have all the answers, right? Conversations start getting technical. It's typically a good signal, right? It means that they're interested. No one's asking technical questions if they don't care about what you're talking about, which makes a segue to a meeting a no-brainer. But it'll cover the FAQs. It'll cover a strategy with the gatekeeper. It'll cover the value prop with the decision maker, your qualification questions, your objection handlers, and the close, which is the handoff. It's scheduling that meeting. Right. This part is super important to our process, and it's collaborative. So once our growth team builds the talk track, and even companies and clients of ours that have one, will let our growth team kind of take that bird's eye approach and build it, and then we'll collaborate on it. We'll get it to a point where both sides are like, okay, this is a super sound strategy. Once the talk track is green lit, the next step is we test it. So we'll take a senior sales rep in the marketplace. We'll put him or her on a shift or two. We'll have them run through a series of personalized outbound outreach, which leads with phone calls, but then is complemented with mediums like email and SMS. And then we'll send our clients a stack of call audios for feedback, right? Which is kind of our final checks and balances, right? And this speaks to your point, Scott. You're talking about, accountability, identity, and integrity. This level of transparency is how we built our platform. So, this gives them confidence that, hey, this is my brand being represented the way I expect it to? Or my value props coming off in a way that actually resonates with my ideal customers? Are there any objections that we might not have anticipated that now we're experiencing with this new value prop? It gives us an opportunity to cross our T's, dot our I's before we actually push play on the campaign. Now, once the onboarding process is complete, or Scott, did you have a question on the onboarding before I jump into?
Well, just another. So if as a sales leader, if I ask my reps for talk time or recordings, I would often feel, and now more than ever, I would feel like I'm intruding. They might feel threatened.
Right.
And that's very difficult. But again, the beauty of engaging with an outside organization is contractually, you're going to provide that. No one feels threatened.
Right.
It's part of the thing, right? And you showed me when you demoed your system to me, and it's a couple of months ago that you did this, but I could basically, first of all, I could book, like, let's say I want to do a campaign Wednesday afternoon. I could book 2 really high-end account execs from 4 to 6.
Yeah.
And I could see how many calls they made the next day. And I might even be able to, I'm not sure, I might be misrepresenting this, but I might even be able to just click on a button and see how the call went.
Yeah. So once we complete the onboarding, that's when the magic starts happening. Essentially, the platform is going to take all that data that we collected and built out for the very specific campaign we're running, and it's going to match you with sales reps, independent sales reps that want to work on your campaign. They've been matched on a variety of different variables. We look at language, experience, seniority level, job titles. They've all been pre-screened, vetted, and verified, criminal record checks, background checks, the employment verification, the gamut, and they've expressed interest. They want to work on your campaign. If you like the sports analogy, think of them as free agents, right? They're all independent sales reps. They want to be on your team, but you're the coach. You're building your starting line. So you can dig into their profiles. You can take a look at their bios. You can listen to an audio pitch of them. You can take a look at some of their performance data on previous campaigns, and then you make the call, yay or nay, right? You hit yay, they're added to your team. This is your fractional sales team. Once you hit yay and you add them to your team, essentially all that work we went into that onboarding, right? Ideal customer profile, the talk tracks, the stable platform generates these very custom training modules to get this fractional sales team ramped up. And again, we're not teaching these people how to sell. They're all experienced sales professionals. They know the fundamentals of outbound sales. What we're doing is we're bringing them up to speed on your business as quickly and efficiently as possible. Once they complete the onboarding, our platform is powered by this proprietary system we call Jasper. Product team and Jordan, the CEO, who is, kind of like the technical mind behind the platform, has put a lot of work into Jasper. And think of Jasper as like your assistant sales manager, right? And one of the things Jasper will do is every single week, he'll programmatically take a look at your budget, right? We'll take a look at your team's availability. And then Scott, to what you're just touching on, he'll take a look at your campaign configurations. And you've got a lot of customizations for your campaign, right down to setting the ideal call windows, right? The days of the week, the times of the day that you actually want the outreach to happen, right? Which is more relevant to some industries than others, right? The great examples, if if you're selling to restaurants, you probably don't want someone, reaching out during lunch service or dinner service. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You can configure your ideal call windows. Jasper will generate the schedule, and then your reps work, right? And as shifts are completed, Jasper is going to shoot you a daily digest of all the shift activity. You can actually access it and unpack it in the stable platform. Activity metrics, right? You can actually see how hard the rep worked, right? How many emails went out, how many calls were made. And then, we call this performance metrics. That's how effective they were with their time. How many meetings did they book? How many opportunities did they open up? Right down to, again, every email, every call being recorded, accessible to our clients in the platform. So full transparency. And that's how we, again, it's not holding the SDR accountable for your revenue, but it's definitely holding the SDRs accountable for the work that you're contracting.
The activity. And I'm going to shift gears here, Clarence. Thanks for a bit of that. Move over to Zora. Zora, I mean, it's been some time since you and I engaged, probably over 5 years. I'll tell the folks that are on this call here how it worked for us back in the day. Hey, Zora, I'm coming to Warsaw, Istanbul, and then Vienna over the next 2 weeks. Can you get me meetings? and I would fly in and we would have meetings. And not only would we have meetings, but they would be at the right level with the right type of enterprise. It was very tactical. It was very simple, but it was very effective. Is that still how you work, or how do you work now? Like, you've grown, right? Like, you now have 10 people. So how have you modified your approach, if at all? Because it worked before.
Good point. Things changing even since last time for EMEA region, specifically for Central Eastern Europe, where I'm mostly active: Germany, Austria, France, UK, a little bit less, simply because of the data privacy and GDPR. When we worked 5 years ago, we can approach directly if you even don't know CISO or CIO or DPO, data protection officers. That was the case for Titus. These days, Scott and rest of the team developing EMEA, they really need OmniGlobe. Reason why? Because we hold personal relationship with the CISO during Titus time, during other vendors' time, that now we are just going back to this trusted relationship. And if I send an email to CISO in Raiffeisen Bank or Erste Bank or Siemens, for example, I'm on approved list. If I don't know them, we can have a legal obligation toward GDPR. So that's why a majority of the security vendors, even if they are already on the market, but need to speak with very senior guys in these enterprise deals, they come to us. Like Threat Connect is American product, N8 is a Canadian product, etc. So we're carrying several vendors with the people. But our sweet spot is really managing complex sales. It's enterprise sales and driving value to all of this, which means we're formalizing proper account strategy for all these accounts and defining the crucial stepping stone to each of them and knowing how to approach to C-level. You've been experiencing this. That's where they're making a decision. That's where they're making a check. That's when we always go top down. So that's our expertise and our boutique way of approaching to these stakeholders. And then selling in the EMEA region, as most of you know, it's different than selling in North America. As you realized, I'm Canadian. I've been selling Canada, US prior to Europe. Europe is more based really on the use case. CISO get used to be sold, and we're shortening sales cycles, simply use case, pain points, use case, and sense of urgency. That's the value proposition. That's quite interesting. That's how I'm teaching the vendors who are entering EMEA, or who are already selling but they're not successful, how to approach to this CISO, what they're really looking for. They want to see 10 banking use case with a sense of urgency in order for us to shorten the sales cycle.
Okay, good stuff. And would you say, in terms of the different cultural nuances, right, in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, or EMEA, as I used to call it, like, do you modify your service depending on what market you're going into?
Yes, absolutely. If you remember just beating the deals in Turkey, it's different than when we're selling in Germany or France, because even approaching to this culture, their buying decision is different than Western Europe. Eastern Europe is different than Western Europe. Germany is more like Canada or US or Nordics. But, because I am from all this language speaking culture and also Canadian, North American, then bridging that gap in culture, not just the business and making money, it's cultural things. People here buy from people who are already get to know, who trust them, who see them. And as you remember, we've been traveling on a weekly basis. We've been in front of every CISO or CIOs in the major organization. That really helped us to bring new vendors into the same relationship and shorten the sales cycle.
Yeah, no, that's great. And if I were to sort of summarize both for Clarence and Zora, Zora, it seems to me that your ideal prospect, so the type of organization that would want to look at OmniGlobe for contracting out some components of the sales function, it would have to be ideally an enterprise sale. Ideally in the security space, but not necessarily, but you've got a lot of experience in the security space. Yes. And then a somewhat complex sale, right? So it's not a transactional. Yeah.
When we need CGI, when it's very hard to get CGI even in North America, I was succeeding in Germany and France, as you know. When we need T-System, Atos, I'm in a closely touch with them, TELUS, for example. So it's a complex sales. And then I also need technical support.
And that's it. You got to support your salespeople, but also your sales contractors as a company. Clarence, if I were to, and I was not able to, are you the gamut? Like, can you do SaaS transactional right through to enterprise, or do you have a sweet spot?
Yeah, we've got a sweet spot. One of the qualifying criteria that we need for a client to do business with is we need at least a 5-figure ACV that they're chasing. So if they're chasing a 5-figure deal plus, it's going to make a lot of sense for us to work together. In terms of like company size, we work primarily with SMBs and startups, right? So Sweet Spot seems to be under 50 employees, but it's SMBs and startups. Their industries, largest cohort on the platform is SaaS companies selling to all verticals, which makes sense because the strategy is kind of the textbook strategy for SaaS. So 26% of our business is SaaS. The next largest cohort we categorize as, we call them agencies. Lots of different businesses that fall into that category. We've got custom software development, marketing, branding agencies, MSPs, where we're setting up discovery calls. 22% of our clients fall into agencies. And then it's just a mixed bag from there. We've got construction companies where we're setting up estimates. We're working with OEMs that manufacture product, and we're helping them get into retailers and distribution channels. We're setting up quotes and orders. Workflow remains the same. We're the warm introduction.
Okay. Yeah. And it does strike me as something, and again, this is going back to the system that I teach, the entrepreneurial operating system. So we talk about within every single organization, there has to be one person accountable for sales or sales and marketing. Sometimes it's one person accountable for sales, one person accountable for marketing, right, one person accountable for operations, and one person accountable for finance. If you have multiple people accountable for any of those functions, no one's accountable, right? So we do preach that within the system, but then it's within a lot of startups, and I've been there, right? And I work with a lot of startups. Generally speaking, it's the CEO that closes the first half dozen deals, right? Whether they want to or not, whether they'd like it or not, right. That's just the nature of the beast. And actually, it's kind of has to happen that way, because in order for them to go raise money, they need to be able to tell their investors like how this particular company bought, or why they bought. And so it would seem to me that the next logical step, once they've got maybe a half dozen and it's got to be a repeatable sale where it's like all the six that we're talking about, they all kind of look the same, smell the same size, same dollar. And then, the way you can put your foot in the water or dip your toe in the water in terms of scaling is you go hire a service like yours, right? And before you go hire that high priced VP of sales potentially.
Right. Exactly.
And then further on down the road, the high priced VP of sales can still leverage your service. And then when the organization gets bigger and has larger size transactions, it seems to me that it might be time to look, and expanding into Europe, Middle East, and Africa, might be time to pick up the phone and call Zuora or check and see what's happening with OmniGlobe.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So those make sense. Now in terms of identity, like this is a big one, right? So I remember how we did it with Zuora. So Zuora carried a Titus business card. I mean, she was not an employee of Titus, but she carried a Titus business card. And I don't know that you were representing any other companies at the time. If you did, Zuora, you certainly did a good job of hiding it from me. So that's good. That's what you don't want to create any anxiety there. But how do you deal with this whole identity thing, right? Like, do your people carry the business card? I'll ask Zuora first. Do you carry the business card of the company you're representing? How do you manage that on LinkedIn? Do you have people managing multiple companies? And is there ever conflict or concern there?
No, we are really producing results, and then that company that we are introducing to the CISOs and CIOs in this enterprise deals and partners, they already know us as a sales agent. So it's really up to vendor of how they wanted to do it. If you remember, we did excellent job getting awareness of Titus in entire EMEA region. But then also customers will know I've been there with them as a sales consultant. So we don't have a problem with that. It's really up to vendor how they wanted to do it. Just like Titus wanted to have me to be a Titus almost full-time / consultant. That's okay.
Okay. And Clarence, and I'm just looking at the time. I got a couple things I want to squeeze in, and we want to honor
ours is pretty straightforward. From like a prospect's perspective, it looks like we're just an extension of your team. It looks like it's your team. We just run out of an inbox that you provide, so every client will give us a dedicated email account or a series of email accounts that we'll prospect from. Obviously, the phone call, the reps are representing themselves as, Clarence from Stable or Clarence from ABC Corp or whatever. And then our LinkedIn motion operates a little bit differently. It's more of an awareness motion that we've got, a process and system in place for. So from a prospect's perspective, they can't tell the difference. And at the introductory call level, at that point, they're not really too focused on the relationship. They're just trying to figure out what it is that you guys do.
Yeah,
right?
like, can you solve a problem I have? I really
Right.
don't care if I can research you on LinkedIn to see if you work for the company. Say, like, that's
Right.
important, I suppose, but really it's, can you solve my problem?
Can you solve the problem? The second we hand off the meeting, rest assured they're looking you up, Scott, on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so and again, I want to be careful of time here. So it's 12:54. I've got a couple things. Thank you both. It's pretty hard to get all this stuff across in a quick fireside chat, but I have a couple things that I wanted to share with the audience here in terms of lessons learned, lessons that I learned, on this journey. So I always found that you really, if you've got a sales and marketing function, it's got to be a capital M, small s to start. I mean, marketing has got to be the organization, the entity that crafts a bit of a strategy. There's a marketing strategy that we teach in EOS where basically you have to identify, your psychographic, your demographic, and your geographic. Like, who do you want to contact, right? What's your list look like? And then from a sales perspective, if you're going to hire a high-priced horsepower, maybe start with marketing and then move to sales. I know that's counterintuitive for the salespeople on this call, even for me, but that was just one of my lessons learned. So go capital M, go small s. Strategy is everything. If you don't have strategy, and if you don't have a repeatable sale, there's really no way you're going to be able to outsource this thing, right? I mean, you're going to be too often organizations and boards say, hey, the answer to our problem is we'll just go out and hire this hired gun, this really well established, reputable VP of sales or chief revenue officer or agency or what have you. But you do need to have a strategy. It needs to, pass muster, and you need to have a list of potential clients. And you need to have about a half. I throw the term half dozen. It could be 20, 30, depending on the size of your transaction. But you need to have some deals under your belt. And that's the repeatable sale component. Don't outsource accountability. So even though I've been a fractional VP of sales, I wouldn't recommend it. I know why I was brought in. I was brought in as a stopgap. There was someone leaving and they didn't really have time or the will to go hire a new exec prior to the private equity acquisition. So I was a nice little 9-month bridge for them. But generally speaking, and by the way, when I was the 9-month bridge, I had accountability, which I thought was a bit weird. But you can't outsource accountability for your sales number to an agency or to a but you can outsource activity for sure. You need to arm them with a pitch deck, and if you don't have a pitch deck or a sales process, you need to co-develop it with them. And Clarence and Zora, I know you've done that with companies, but that's got to be done. There's no shortcuts that can be taken there. Adopt the attitude that if all your contracted sales partner does is open a door at the right level, they've done their job. Now, ideally, they're closing the deal for you as well, or carrying the ball as far as they can. But really, their job, in my opinion, is to open that door at the right level. You're still going to be responsible, really, for selling. And that's why, Zora's comment on she needs SE support. She needs probably an enterprise account exec behind her as well, because at the end of the day, in a complex sale, I don't think you should assume that a complex sale can be sold by an agency, but they should be opening the door and getting you demos and meetings. Pay on revenue delivered if you can, but understand that when I say they, companies like Stable and OmniGlobe, they will probably want a retainer. Don't be surprised by that. But consider performance-based pay, like qualified appointments or demos, that type of thing. So you'll have to negotiate that with the organization. Don't simply pay a retainer and I was guilty of this when I was the VP of sales. I was paying people retainers, and I didn't really, yes, I'd have some metrics, but I didn't really hold them accountable to it. I didn't really pay them on it. And before I knew it, halfway down the 6 months down the road or a year down the road, their retainer was like they'd gotten 60 to 80 to $90,000 out of my company, and I don't have any sales to show for it, let alone demos or proof of concepts, right? So try and create some performance-based compensation for them. Make sure there is value, but don't be shocked if a year goes by and they're making more than you. And this is what I mean by that is that when you contract out sales expertise, and if it's a consistent, really over 12 months, that particular expenditure could be significant. It could be more than your VP of sales. It could be more than you as a CEO. But here's the thing, don't forget that the beauty of contract sales is you can spin them up and spin them down. So you don't have to worry about, feelings being hurt, if you don't have the money or if you don't see the performance. They're in the business of doing contract sales, and you can spin them up and spin them down. And that is the value of doing something like that. So don't forget that. We forgot it from time to time, and we would look at our expenditure and we want to know what we got for it. And the reality is we probably should have turned off this region or turned off that region and thrown a bit more money at this region and that region. But then you forget that you have that flexibility, and you start thinking of these folks as your employees, but really, with all due respect to Clarence and Zora, they're not. They're your contractors, right? And so you have the power here. So those are just some lessons that I learned doing it. I don't know that we have a ton of time for Q&A. It's 1 o'clock right now. But if anyone does have any questions, I know Zora, Clarence, and I are more than happy to stick around. You can send me some questions via the chat, and we'll stick around for the next 10 minutes. Or we can wrap this thing up, and you can reach out to us via LinkedIn if you have any questions afterwards. So I'm just going to give this a couple of minutes here. Oh, here we go. So if you want to drop off, feel free to drop off. But we've got a couple of questions here coming in, so I'll just read them out. Oh, it's just a thank you. So I think that's good. Any other questions? Another thank you. All right. So will you post a link to the recording? Yeah, we'll have, I've got a YouTube channel. I will send you all an email with a link to this once it's compiled and on the YouTube channel. All right, Zora and Clarence, do you want to, in the chat section, do you want to just quickly type in your email address? And I will also include your email address when I send the email out to everyone. All right, so we've got the email addresses in there, and I'm going to stop recording, and I will bid you all adieu.